On this episode of Curve Ahead, I'm joined by Max, the visionary co-founder of Superpower, a health super app on a mission to make personalized, preventable healthcare as accessible as possible. An idea born from his own health struggles and breakthrough recovery, Max created Superpower to give everyday people the kind of advanced care typically reserved for billionaires. In this conversation, we dove into why healthcare is broken by design and how Superpower is flipping the model from reactive to preventative. We also covered how AI and testing can deliver 10x doctor quality care without the six-figure price tag. And if you've ever wanted a smarter, simpler way to understand and take control of your health, this episode is packed with practical inspiration and future-forward thinking. I am also joined by a special co-host, Elliot Bergbauer, who is the host of the Primal Reset podcast, where Elliot uncovers the latest trends in science-backed strategy and transformative practices shaping the health and wellness industry. Elliot, thanks for joining us. This episode of Curve Ahead is sponsored by Atozi, the podcasting agency helping amplify your brand's voice. If you give your brand a microphone, what would it say? This is Curve Ahead. Today, I'm joined by Max, the co-founder of Superpower. Max, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, I'm Max, co-founder of Superpower, and excited to be here.
Max, can you tell me about your background and what led you to start Superpower?
From age to 18, I went through a long period of having lots of health challenges. It would take me 2 to 3 hours to get to sleep every night. I slept through maybe a third or half of my high school classes. And I didn't really know what was wrong with me. I had surgery. I was told to medicate for life. I saw dozens of doctors. And after going through something like that, you start to really start caring about your health. So I did all sorts of things that people used to laugh at, but I thought were helpful. I remember wearing a Gen 1 Aura ring in 2016, and apparently tracking sleep was weird back then. Same with blue light blocking glasses and all sorts of other things. I ended up solving the health problems I have, which was partially fatigue and sleep related, and then partially chronic headaches and sinusitis, by finding someone I call a 10x doctor. I think we have 10x engineers. I think we also have 10x doctors who are far better at what they do than the average doctor. And this is the kind of person that Jeff Bezos might have. And it made me realize there's a big gap between that model of medicine and what most people have access to. And I've believed ever since then, for as long as that gap exists, someone or some company has to come along and close it. And that's what we're doing at Superpower. We're trying to take the cutting edge, the best of medicine, and make that not cost $100,000 a year, but make it cost $100 a year, or ideally as close to free as possible. Between that experience and Superpower, I dabbled in startups and finance and starting my own small things, and then moved to the US around 2 years ago because it's easy to dream big and try to create the future here.
So, I mean, obviously you can tell by your accent, you're not from the US. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're from Australia, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so how does growing up in Australia kind of influence the type of medicine that you experience there versus the healthcare system that we have here in the US?
I don't think it has a huge impact, to be honest. I think that Australia impacts the way I perceive other things in the world. I think it impacts the way I relate to people. I think it impacts the way I communicate and think. But I don't think it had a material impact on my understanding of health. I have always thought of health as somewhat independent of the health system. Because if you look at the health system, it's about incentives and sick care. It's about what happens after you're in hospital, right? If I look at health, what health is about, it's about well care. It's about what happens before you're sick. And I've always found that to be very interesting. And I find that there isn't really a well care system in any country. Instead, people have to choose to opt in to staying healthy and optimally healthy. And that's true for people in Australia. It's true for people in the US. I'm fortunate where I lived in Australia, everyone was healthy. Where I live in the US, most people are quite healthy. And I think that many of the people actually pioneering what optimal and peak health looks like come from the US. So I guess I'm a little bit closer to them now living over here.
It seems like you had 2 cents add-on there.
Yeah, because I speak with a lot of wellness brands and leaders in the space. And what I've kind of realized is everywhere else in the world has a more universal healthcare system than we have. We're more pay to play kind of thing. But at the same time, we're all sick care. We're all, once you get into the hospital, what can we do after the fact? And I love your point to being healthcare almost preventative. Like, how can we focus on health to where we're actually healthy instead of fixing the problems after they arise?
My sense is that we have to make it low cost, easy, and valuable to focus on health. I think that's increasingly the case, right? I think a big part of it starts with culture as well. If you look at blue zones, no one in a blue zone is thinking about how do I be healthy? What do I eat? What's my diet and exercise? How often do I stay? It's like, no, they're just like living their lives, but the culture is one that supports health. If you look at ancient Ayurvedic medicine, they had 3 pillars of health. It was diet, sleep, and it wasn't exercise, it was sex. And the reason why is that exercise was just given. Obviously you're exercising, that's how you get around, that's how you make things happen. And I think it's only in the modern world where we've created a culture that incentivizes the opposite of peak health, which incentivizes processed foods because they're addictive and therefore big companies make money, or incentivizes sitting behind a laptop because a laptop is now leverage and more jobs, or many jobs are behind a laptop rather than out in the fields farming. I think it's only in this modern world where we've established a culture that makes it hard to be healthy. So I think a lot about how do we actually shift things at the level of culture, because then we don't have to actually micromanage every little thing we do. Instead, it just becomes normal. I don't know exactly how that emerges. I think part of it is cities are powerful and communicate things to people. For example, people in LA and SF and New York are healthier, partially because the culture incentivizes more health. There are definitely online communities that are starting to incentivize health. There's an interesting version of it, of like social media, which some people might say has a perverse impact on health, which is that it results in over concern for body image. And other people might say that actually it has a positive impact on health because now access to health information is low. Anyone can see the healthy workout, and the incentive to look good is high. And looking good is a very strong correlator with actually being healthy. One trend I really see is I can predict someone's biological age based on how old they look, right? So actually when someone says how old someone looks, it kind of maps to chronological age, but I found it's a far better predictor of biological age. In other words, looking younger is actually also resulting in your organs being healthier, which results in you living longer. So I think many of those aesthetic trends might actually trickle down to a broad spectrum health.
So you had mentioned the notion of a 10x doctor, and it's usually reserved for someone who's at the most upper echelon. How are you closing the gap and making those services, those types of services, available to someone like myself or Elliot?
So if you look at what a Jeff Bezos has, he has a team of maybe 5 doctors who sit there and gather all of his data and bring it into one place and input it into a system and then analyze it. And they sit there and they try to understand and connect the dots between the data. And then once they've connected the dots, they try to work out what he should do. And they research all of the best products, all of the best therapies. And then they say to Jeff, here's what you should do. Don't even think about it. We've done everything for you. And that requires a team of lots of people who are quite smart and spend a lot of time. Now, most people, unfortunately, don't have that reality. Instead, they have a 5 to 10 minute consult with a doctor to solve a small condition. But AI is fundamentally changing that, because the implication of AI is that anyone can have this team that is gathering all of their data, that is testing their whole body, that is connecting the dots, that is diving deep into understanding what is going on, and then is telling you what to do, and is finding all of the best therapies and things out there that are actually efficacious. So anyone can have that, right? Because AI does this really, really effectively. So a big part of it is, how do we take something that was historically only something that the best humans could do when they're spending hours, to something that the system can do in minutes? And I think, fortunately, that's the world we're in now with where we have gotten to with these large language models.
Yeah, I mean, AI is definitely a game changer, and it's a very common topic for me to talk about with a lot of founders, because it's either provided them with an additional opportunity to leverage it, or it's been disruptive to how things have traditionally been done. I think one of the main concerns a lot of people have had, and I'm hoping that we can talk about this a little bit, is just the one training the model with data and privacy surrounding it. So what does Superpower do differently when it comes to being able to create an AI model that is protective of somebody's very personal health information, but also be able to provide enough data back that it's actionable?
All data is is anonymized, encrypted. Everything we do is HIPAA compliant, third party certified and vetted as HIPAA compliant. All founding engineers were all building in data security previously. So it's something we take really, really seriously. That's, I think they're the steps that have to exist when you have access to a lot of people's health data.
Well, I love the idea of what you're doing, because I think that it's something that's super necessary for a lot of people out there who are just trying to have a healthier lifestyle. Like, I looked in the mirror a couple of years ago and be like, I need to make a change. Like, I used to be a really fit athlete. I've kind of gotten away from that. And then now I'm trying to work my way back, but through kind of a different avenue. Like, I love the idea of being able to provide people with the support of living a healthy lifestyle and understanding what individuals need in order for them to perform at their peak performance.
As in, like, what are the things we can do to achieve peak performance?
I mean, for me, I know earlier this year, like, I did a big blood panel to just make sure that everything looked good from that perspective, to see if, like, I'm pushing 40, to just make sure that, like, my testosterone levels are high enough, that, like, I'm getting enough sleep. I mean, considering that I've got a 2-year-old, I would say probably not. But am I actually living a healthy lifestyle, or healthy enough lifestyle, that I'm staying fit and hopefully increasing my lifespan to be able to live a long, happy life with my family?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it starts with testing, because then you know what's going on. And the second you know what's going on or going wrong, you can start taking steps to improve things. I do think that if you systematically solve for the foundations of health, you solve for every disease and thing on top of those foundations. And the way healthcare evolved was not like that. The way healthcare evolved was, let's wait for symptoms to emerge and then let's try to, like, get a whack-a-mole hammer and like Band-Aid and fix them retroactively. If I look at the foundations of health, I think of them as metabolism, inflammation, hormonal balance, micronutrient and mineral balance, toxin load and detoxification, and then finally gut health. And I believe that if we systematically solve for every single one of these things, we start to be able to improve every output or like phenotype or expression of health off the back of that. And all of these things can be tested for. Metabolism, you can look at A1C and other metabolic markers. Hormone balance, you can look at the male sex hormones, the female sex hormones, thyroid health, cortisol. Inflammation, you can look at CRP and IL-6 and other biomarkers of inflammation. All of these. Gut health, you can do a gut microbiome test. Toxin load, you can assess for liver function and also assess specific levels of toxins in the body, like heavy metals and mold. And when you start doing these things, you can see what's wrong, you can take action, and you tend to feel the benefits. Like, I am way more energetic now than I was 2 years ago, because I've tried to just systematically improve my health across all of these dimensions.
One question, if I can hop in, I think to the whole point of, like, where to start, I think is probably the biggest hurdle that we need to get over on the preventative health side of things within, the community and the world, really. Because, like, what Brian has done with the blood draw and kind of seeing what's wrong, I think people overwhelm themselves with what is wrong and how can I fix all of it right now? And then they're kind of stuck, So what I would ask you, Max, is what is your advice or your opinion on the first step? And no matter what it is, what would be the very first step that someone can take in order to start becoming healthier?
I'll give two answers. One is get the real basics right: diet, exercise, and sleep. Probably, yeah, so that's probably number one. And then number two is actually test things. Like, when you see a problem, it creates a impetus to fix the problem. And when you see a problem, you know what you need to fix as well. So I cheated and gave you two answers, but they're my two.
No, it's great answers. I like that. I always say, start with the smallest things and test them. Like, if you, I don't know, had a test done and you realize that your calcium levels are too high or whatever it may be, maybe stop drinking as much milk every single day. Do it for a week, see how you feel. If you don't feel any different after a week, maybe try something different. And then that way you can kind of find out, like, in a cheaper way as well, rather than having a team of Jeff Bezos's doctors. You can find out in your own way relatively cheaply, this is what worked for me and this is what didn't work for me.
Yep, very much agree. And I think developing interoception is important. I think the value of using a CGM or an Aura ring or something like that is you start to be able to understand how an input, something I do in my day-to-day life, affects an output, right? A biomarker. For example, a lot of people, the obvious one is people will discover that drinking alcohol before bed really impacts HRV and sleep and restfulness. And I think a CGM is a more potent version of that because we're wearing it continuously and every single thing we eat has an output on the continuous glucose monitor. So we start to see how food impacts our health. And over time, we can remove the CGM, we can remove the Aura ring, but we have the feeling of the interoception within our body to actually do that mapping ourselves. I can now sense how I sleep. I can now sense the impact of food on my health, even without the device.
I've definitely considered for a while. A little bit of like my backstory is I was a collegiate athlete, and I considered for a while getting a CGM just to, I've got no real issues, but to understand how what I was fueling my body with was actually fueling my body, and was I doing it the right way? Because I have a very different relationship with food than, say, like my wife. Like, I think of food as fuel for me to be able to work out and continue sustaining myself. It's like, for her, like, sometimes she thinks this food is as treats. Obviously, at night, I'm going to have like a bowl of ice cream if I've had a good day or a good week or whatever. I mean, it doesn't stop me from having those treats, but I don't look at it the same way. Food for me is fuel for continuity.
Yep. I find that it's really interesting. I see a lot of people in the US talk about mental health and why rates are on the rise. And people often cite social media. The problem with that is then you'd expect mental health rates to be on the rise more or less universally throughout the world. Right? I've lived in Italy. People use social media the same as the US. I've lived in Australia. Same story. They're not on the rise the same throughout the globe. So like, what is true about the US that is not true about elsewhere? People might then point to incentives. Well, there's an incentive to say someone has a mental health issue because then you can prescribe and pharma companies make money. Yeah, but again, that incentive like kind of exists around the world. Maybe the US is a little bit more fucked up, but it kind of exists. I think the primary input into mental health rates going up is actually food at the level of how it impacts gut health. And I notice that if I have the quality of my day is primarily a function of the food I eat. Like, there's a lot of other, like, it's actually primarily a function of the food I eat. And if I fuck with my metabolism early in the day, I'm brain fogged out for the next 6 to 8 hours. And I don't feel like doing work. I feel kind of shitty. I'm grumpy. I'm snappy at people. I'm impatient just by dysregulating my metabolism early in the day. And I would contend that some people have permanently dysregulated metabolism because of what they're putting into their body. And I think this is not spoken about nearly enough.
I would agree with that. And I've lived in a couple of different places in the US as well, so I've seen it firsthand. I would ask you, do you think you could take it almost a step further and say it's the culture in the United States? The first thing we do, waking up, having a coffee, eating sugar, going to work, like even the water intake that we have is a very different quality than it is almost everywhere else in the world. I would agree with that, but I would also ask, do you think it's also our culture, not just the food?
Yeah, I think they definitely go hand in hand. I think the culture supports unhealthy food and it supports unhealthy eating practices. For example, snacking is not a good thing for you, but some CPG company realized you can make money from snacking and therefore everyone has been told that you should snack. I think that a lot of things which are demonized, maybe they shouldn't be demonized full stop. For example, in France, in Italy, they wake up, they drink coffee, they have a croissant, and it's healthy. Because when you have that on a base of like sound metabolic function, it's actually okay. The carbs don't have a negative impact. The wheat is high quality. The butter is high quality and organic, and that's it. It's not loaded with all sorts of other shit. The problem is in the US, the butter is low quality, and there's a bunch of preservatives, and there's a bunch of added sugar, and maybe there's high fructose corn syrup, and the wheat is really shit quality and loaded full of pectins, and the gluten is tolerated differently by people. Because of in many ways, because of the incentives that exist in the US, all food, water, soil, farming degrades, And that means that the equivalent thing is far more unhealthy. And then that compounds because it's unhealthy in a way that's addictive, that supports continuing to double down on that unhealthy behavior. So I do think a big part of it's cultural.
I would say, just to add to that, because I agree with you. I think it is culture as much as it is food quality that we have in the United States, as well as water and any sort of liquid in that aspect. Coca-Cola, when they first started, put cocaine in their drinks to make it addictive, to make people actually buy it and continue buying it. And what they realized, and they switched off of cocaine, putting it in their drinks, not just because moral reasons or legally it's correct to do that. They switched to high fructose corn syrup because it's actually 10 times more addicting than cocaine is.
Wow.
Which is wild. But at the same time, that's what creates that sugary, ultra unhealthy drink. But we can't stop drinking it because once we've had that taste, it's kind of, a drug addict. Once we've had that taste, you can't stop. It's very difficult to stop.
Yeah, I hear you. It's really brutal.
I mean, from the other perspective, right? Like I said that I'm a parent of a toddler. Like there's obviously things that I limit his intake of, or like he's never eaten before, because I think along the lines of this conversation, like it's just not necessarily safe for him to have. And I don't know if there's really an age where it would be safe for him to have it. So that it's a little bit of a mind fuck, like thinking about that, but that's okay.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see where we get to. I think that I suspect that I was playing this hypothetical out with a friend a little bit ago of if you were rebuilding the US healthcare system from scratch, how would you do it? And there are a bunch of people all opining on how to do it. And the conclusion I came to is that I would start by just fixing the food system. And I think you fix the food system, you fix so many of the problems with the US healthcare system. And we're not really doing that, but hopefully we get there sometime in the coming years. I think that people are starting to vote in favor of the healthy alternative. And I think if enough people vote with their dollars, things start to change. That said, I suspect that vote is unequally distributed. I still think there's a big part of middle America that can't afford organic food, right? Or the culture there is particularly not supportive of health. And American life expectancy is a tale of two stories. On one hand, you have New York, LA, New York, California, Florida, all doing well. Life expectancy is actually increasing. And then you have a handful of other states where the opposite is happening. And I think that the primary input into that delta is the way culture affects food. And I think there's this big trend of food as medicine, which is good, and I'm excited to see how it pans out.
Yeah, we've definitely seen the negative effects from, I remember as a kid, like my parents would always say, well, I had that when I was a kid and, it was fine. It's like we could take Gatorade, for example. When they first started, it was, I think, 3 or 4 ingredients. It was potassium, it was a little bit of salt, electrolytes, basically. And now it's 74 ingredients with, not actually, but it's significantly more ingredients with so much more additives in it. And we've even seen, like, I think the teenage population to, like, in these for men, their testosterone levels are that of a 70-year-old, which should not happen. And then we see autism rates skyrocket. It's like 1 in 3 kids are now autistic on some sort of spectrum. And it's all based on not just the food that we eat, but also the foods that our moms are eating. And with this new generation, we've seen it in the last 20 years changing, 30 years changing, that we've seen all the negative effects. And I think people are starting to finally realize, especially with the administration change with RFK now, at least attempting to fix this food system, people are starting to realize, like, hey, maybe we did mess up and we're eating the wrong things. We might need to switch back.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm going to change the topic up a little bit and kind of jump backwards. So Max, can you give us kind of a 15,000 foot overview of what Superpower is, what the problem is that you're solving, and then who it is that you're looking to help with this platform?
Yeah, we're creating a healthcare super app that does all of the things we wish the healthcare system did. That starts with comprehensive testing. So every year, our members will access at least 100 blood biomarkers, lab tests, that will show them what's going on across many of the foundations of health I mentioned: metabolism, inflammation, cardiovascular health, hormones, gut function, environmental toxins, etc. Once someone has that data, We bring it to them all in one app. We pull in all of their past data, and people have this feeling of, finally, I actually feel like I'm in control of my health, right? Like I feel like I can actually explore things and understand my health rather than it being gatekept. From there, we make it really easy for someone to take action. People don't want to have to think about it too much. They want to know they can trust the system and know that they can tell it your goals and that it can help you actually achieve those goals. So we bring as many parts of the health system as possible into one place, only what we think of as like the healthy, holistic, functional versions, and we guide someone through this journey to peak health over the course of the year.
That's incredible. So I saw on your site that you're still doing waitlist. When are you planning on being able to roll that out?
We'll let people know. We're slowly bringing people off the wait list faster and faster, and we'll be removing the wait list soon enough. So keep your eyes out.
It's something definitely that I'm interested personally for just understanding long term and trying to stay as healthy as I possibly can. So I'm going to change topics again a little bit. You have been a part of a couple of different startups at this point in time. Can you teach me a lesson in less than 3 minutes of something that you've learned the hard way as a serial founder that you could save someone like a first-time founder a lot of heartache and time?
Ignore 90% of advice because it's wrong and distracting. In particular, ignore expert advice. The more someone understands the past of an industry, the less they potentially understand the future of the industry. Instead, reason from first principles, reason based on emotion that you feel, reason based on what you think the world needs or what you want for yourself and for your parents, right? Understand that intuition and that emotion. Everyone might tell you why you're stupid or wrong or off base or it doesn't logically stack up. And most of the time, those people will be wrong. And the job of a founder is not to copy what's worked in the past. It's to have an opinion around what's going to work in the future. And it's really interesting. In 2022, I pitched what I thought would be the future of healthcare. In other words, an AI doctor. And back then, everyone thought it was not investable. I had to change what I pitched because it was not investable, the thing I was pitching. No one wanted to hear it. The great irony is now we've come full circle. And the thing that I was pitching in 2022 is like the most hyped thing. VC is like, this is going to be the big category, a massive. I'm like, oh yeah, fucking 3 years later. So I think that I kind of let the world psych me out. I let the world make me believe, oh, the world's right and I might be wrong. And I think that the job of a founder is to do the opposite. It's to actually shape the world to what you believe in. And sometimes you'll be wrong. Sometimes you'll be right, and you need to take that risk, right? If you're just doing what everyone knows is right, then there's unlikely to be any alpha.
That resonates super hard with me, Elliot. I see you nodding as well. I think that you're in the same boat. Like that resonates.
Absolutely. Kind of, if you listen to everyone else's advice, you'll be just like everybody else, to make it real simple.
Love that. So I know that you said that you're slowly taking people off the wait list. What is the biggest challenge that Superpower faces in the next year? And what are the steps that you guys are taking to overcome it?
Talent is the most important thing. There's this idea in Silicon Valley of what matters more, product or distribution. And I think the answer is neither. It's people, it's talent. Because the people on our team will build the product and will distribute the product. So the number one challenge is finding really brilliant people. Because if we find really brilliant people, we'll do really great work and we will reach a lot of people. We'll build an amazing product that feels more like Apple than a healthcare system. So the hardest thing is always finding great people.
What does that look like for you? Finding great people. How do you define greatness in your mind? Like, what are the assets or characteristics of that great person? Do they have to understand the entire vision, or are you going to help pull them along of the vision of Superpower? Or are you looking for someone that's spearheading the way and communicating it on your behalf?
I find that great people need little direction because they share a similar vision and create and add to the vision in a way that allows them to do work to a really high standard. For example, we're hiring at the moment for a head of editorial, someone to do content for us. And one form of finding that person is let's find someone who's ran an editorial before and they managed a team of 10 writers and 5 editors, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, cool, whatever. Another way of hiring for that role is let's find a founder who has built a consumer product company and a really stunning brand, and they've created interesting content around that brand, and they've created a world, and they have taste and vision. And for them, editorial is not, let's just ship another blog. It's like, what does it look like to create like a product, like something emotional, like a world, right? And it's really hard to find those people who don't just think of what they're doing as, here's my role, let me just do it. But people who actually create and expand the definition of their role to make the output something far greater than is typical.
Yeah, it was funny. I was having a conversation similar to this the other day, and it was about communication styles, and he had mentioned that there isn't enough common sense in the world, right? Like, you would think that just being clear, concise, and open with your communication, whether good or bad, is common sense. And he's like, that's just not how the world works. Like, I have so many people who work for me that they don't have those things. And then we got into this conversation about high IQ versus EQ and how they differ when it comes to like communication styles. So I understand what you're saying, and it's very similar to being able to communicate what it is that you're looking to do, but through some sort of stylization, because everybody has a different lens on life and how a brand should look. It's being able to collaborate with you and execute on the ideas that you have, but also implement their own lens to make sure that what they're putting out really looks fucking cool.
Yep. I really love that. I think a synonym for that is taste. And I think that taste inflects everything someone does. And it's hard to assess for taste and hard to find taste. But when we find it, the final outcome or output is always far greater.
Love that. So, Max, I want to be respectful of your time. You've been a great guest so far. I give all of my guests 90 seconds at the end of my podcast to plug anything that they're passionate about. So in your case, that could be Superpower, that could be anything else. So without further ado, next 90 seconds are yours.
I think there are a few things people might want to check out. One is Superpower. Superpower.com will allow them to sign up to the waitlist, or if they want to skip the waitlist early, you can message me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And number two is I've started writing a weekly newsletter called Max's Musings, maxsmusings.com. And that shares things I'm learning and discovering, top spaces, brands, articles, etc. And someone can stay in the loop there. And then if someone's listening who wants to work at Superpower and thinks that they have that creative spark or that taste, then I'd also encourage you to reach out and get in touch.
Great. Well, thank you again for your time.
No, thank you.